everybody, and welcome to the first spoiler review episode of season 3 of Ted Lasso here from the Outlaw Nation. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, Coach Rocha, joined by Coach Shannon McClung over here. If you've known, we've done the first 2 seasons. In case you've gotten to be a fan of the channel since the second season finished. Shannon and I have reviewed the first season and the second season, so we are back to do the third season as well. Shannon, how are you? How you feeling?
Oh my goodness, Johnny, we're back. We're back with Richmond. We're
Yes.
back with Ted, with Rebecca, with Beard, with Roy Kent. We're back with that snake in the grass, Nate Shelley. So many feelings.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to talk about this first episode. Smells like Mean Spirit. A nice, clever play on that. A lot going on in this episode to kind of set the table for season 3. Remember, these seasons are not that long here on Apple TV for Ted Lasso, but we do get into some really interesting emotional journeys with all of these characters. And already by the end of this first episode, we've laid some groundwork of where we're going with some of these characters, who their antagonists are going to be for the season, what is the emotional overall storyline they're going to have to confront, go over. So there's a lot to jump into for sure. Real quick before we do, though, I want to remind you all to subscribe to the channel down below. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button so you see we're dropping all the content we do here on the Outlaw Nation channel, just like this. We love to review certain things. And, of course, the Geek Buddies are a separate thing. They're on the Outlaw Nation channel, but Shannon and I review this for the Outlaw Nation instead of for the Geek Buddies. We have fun talking about it. So, Shannon, overall, what are your thoughts as we're coming back? Remember, Keeley and Roy were, kind of having issues here at the end of last season. AFC Richmond was promoted at the end of last season into the Premier League, which is a big deal. Of course, the top league in England. We saw Ted dealing with panic attacks, dealing with a new therapist in his life. We saw Coach Beard going on some crazy one episode escapades, and we saw Roy Kent and Jamie Tart come together in hugs. And of course, Sam and Rebecca had started something, and then it kind of dissipated. So what did you think overall of jumping into this first episode of the third season?
Well, season 2 was really about dads. I mean, it was Ted dealing with the history with his father. You had Jamie Tart and his dad. You had Nate and his dad. You had Sam and his dad. You had Rebecca losing her dad. So it was really about fathers. So coming into season 3, it seems like, because, there had been some speculation, is this going to be the last season? They said it was, maybe it's not. Now they're saying it probably is. Coming into this, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. Like this is done, because Ted's whole kind of view on things, at least in episode 1, is why are we here?
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing this? And Dr. Sharon says at the beginning, you don't quit things, Ted. And I think there's a reality where at the end of this season, Ted quits, and not in a negative way. I think the whole don't be a quitter.
Right.
That's great for certain situations, but there are some situations where it's okay to say, I've done my part. I've run my race. I'm done. And in the long run, maybe Ted quitting and going back home, maybe that's going to be the right thing. Maybe Rebecca fires him, and not in a malicious way, but sort of a thank you for your service. So it'll be really, really curious. I mean, I don't think there's a reality where AFC Richmond wins the whole thing. That's just my guess.
Yeah. I mean, it is almost impossible in the history of the modern Premier League where a team has been promoted and then wins the Premier League in their first season. It's almost unheard of in the modern Premier League era. In fact, looking at my mind since the early 90s, I can't recall any team that's ever been promoted and won the Premier League in the first season of their promotion. So the stuff they're talking about in the locker room is actually correct. I mean, a lot of teams that get promoted get relegated because they can't handle the strain and the pressure of being up in the Premier League. There's a lot of money they have to spend to bring in new players to compete at the level that the Premier League competes at. They're traveling to new stadiums. There's a lot more pressure put on them from the fans. There's a lot that happens here. And some coaches just can't handle the style of the Premier League and the grind of the Premier League and eventually succumb and head on down. In fact, we're seeing that happening now with some of the clubs that have been promoted in the current Premier League, and we're about 13 games away from ending the season. So it's going to be very interesting as we go on the tail end.
Now for the uninitiated, like myself,
sure.
if you could define the style and the grind of the Premier League in terms of coaching, what is that difference?
Well, you're dealing with higher level managers almost across the board with almost all the teams. And so they're much more seasoned and experienced with tactics. They're much more seasoned and experienced about when to play their best players, when to let their players rest a little bit. Also, what teams that they what teams they should be employing their best tactics against, which it doesn't mean that everybody doesn't want to win. Of course, they all want to win, but they also know there are certain teams they're not going to be able to beat, but they're going to do their damnedest and set their team to play a certain style, to play a certain way. So you'll see that. And some teams just don't have the money to afford the great players. Most of the teams, I would say, don't have the money to afford the great players. So they have to adjust their tactics to be a lot more defensive minded, to be much more on the counterattack. So you're taking advantage of those maybe off days that the top teams might have, and you could sneak in and get a draw or get a victory or what have you. So you've got to know how to employ your players, how to manage their physical strain, all of that, and the tactics and the styles. Certain teams play park the bus. Other teams are much more free-flowing. Some teams mix both. Some teams are all counterattacking. So you're seeing a 0-0 game until almost the last few minutes. So it's all about navigating how to employ the tactics in your players and when to do so and try to stay alive and accrue points. Some teams are just about accruing as many points as possible because they can stay in the Premier League and keep making that money, but not challenge necessarily for the top spots. A lot of these teams understand where they fit in the pecking order of the Premier League. So that's what one of those situations as well.
Gotcha.
You know? So yeah, there's just a lot that goes into it, and for the players as well. You know, you're getting it's a much more rougher league. There's a lot more hitting, bumping. You know, it's like rubbing ain't racing. It's the same thing with the Premier League style of football. It's much more rougher than other styles of other leagues rather across the world. And some people will get mad about it from La Liga or Bundesliga. Bullshit. The Premier League is one of the hardest leagues to succeed in because there's a much more rougher style in terms of the play there. And it's always been that historically in England. So, but anyway, let's jump into this. I loved this first episode. I was immediately in tears from the opening moments there with Ted and his son there, Jamie having a conversation, Ted and his son, about him going back, you know, and apparently he's been there for 6 weeks with Ted in London and doing his thing and living there and we've got fort cities and all of that. But let's focus on the Ted storyline here. Shannon, we got a lot that happened to him here. As I mentioned, his son, also him dealing with the pressure from Rebecca, who wants to now defeat her ex-husband, who is in charge of West Ham, wants to defeat Nate as an extension, but keeps saying her ex-husband's name and not the name of the team, the Hammers there, West Ham. And so that becomes a thing that Ted has to navigate as well. We also see Ted dealing with the fact that a majority of the pundits and the papers are saying that AFC Richmond is going to finish last in the Premier League. And then also we're dealing with him and Nate taking shots at him during that press conference. So by the end, we see Ted also getting on the phone with his son and hearing about mom's new friend. So, I mean, Thanos is just a perfect thing to have on his hand, you know, kind of eliminating half the galaxy.
Just snapping Ted out of existence.
Snapping Ted out of the picture, yeah. So what did you think overall of the Ted storyline to lay the groundwork for what we're going to get from him in the first season? And, of course, what you mentioned, him questioning whether he even should be there anymore.
I mean, Jason Sudeikis as a talent, it's kind of easy to dismiss him. And
Right?
I think that's where this show... That's where he has really shined in this show. Like, he was on SNL for many years.
Yeah.
He was always popular, but he was never the guy. Like, he was never the Kristen Wiig, you know? I mean, there was always some, like, he was never the Bill Hader. He was always
more Phil Hartman-ish, right? Wouldn't you say? Like the utilitarian.
I mean, I think he kind of filled that role in that he could pop in and pop out, but he was never the guy that I thought that I would imagine anyone thought was going to go and be a star. Like him being in Horrible Bosses, being part of a 3-man team, that made sense. It's like he doesn't have the chops. He doesn't have the gravitas to do this by himself. And that's where Ted Lasso, that's where he has really, really shined, because he's been so fantastic. Because obviously we know Jason Sudeikis is funny, but the emotion, the vulnerability that he exhibits time after time, especially in this opening. And the writers did a really good job, a little 3-card Monty, where we see he's at an airport. We see a text from his wife, ex-wife, saying, "I love you, have a great flight," and then them asking for passenger Lasso, and then we find out he's there with his son. So his son has been visiting, went through a tremendous growth spurt.
Yes, he did.
But you can see the mask that he wears when people are watching, like the moment that he's there talking to the flight attendant, talking to his son, the moment that people turn away, this smile, this effervescent smile that lights up a room just drops. And you see him go back to his apartment and basically disassemble what his life has been for the past 6 weeks. I mean, you see, like, he probably did not make his son do one single chore. You see cereal bowls still out, Legos everywhere. I mean, it's really, really, I mean, it's sad, because we have grown to love this character. I would say not even in spite of his more colorful aspects, like his kind of cringy dad jokes and whatnot. But you know, watching him basically just kind of like, all right, let's do it again. And you know, the goal for the long time was to be promoted, and he did it. Like, he got there. And now the whole idea of trying to win this whole thing, and Jan Moss does a great job in the locker room of saying, statistically, we're going back down. Like, this is not
Jan Moss. Yeah, exactly.
It was, it's just statistics. I mean, it was just really, really fun. And then watching how everyone is affected by the fact that all of the journalists and the pundits have them finishing last. You know, not just Ted, but the players as well. And having them go take that tour of the sewers, which I thought was so funny and just really wonderfully juxtaposed with everything going on with Nate. But then how Ted rolls with it. I mean, you know, Rebecca really wants Ted. She wants someone that he isn't. Like, she wants someone who's going to go out and fight, who's going to get down into the mud and maybe fight dirty a little bit. And you can see that's not Ted's style. I mean, when he at his presser, when he does what he does, and you see Keeley send that text to Rebecca, like, way to let Ted to be Ted. And again, as Nate is obsessively scrolling through his Twitter feed, and the lightning quick English meme makers seeing that you can come at Ted, but ultimately this is what you're going to get back. You're going to get a guy who at his heart is just a good guy and just wants to do the right thing. So yeah, I mean, again, it'll be really, really curious. I'm really curious where this season is going to go. If in fact they do try to squeeze one more season, I kind of hope they don't. I hope the writers just get to tell the story they wanted to tell. But what ultimately Ted's fate is going to be, like, are they going to go on some crazy run? Or, because I know you have had some issues with the past and the reality of, you know, the logistics of the game, or if it's just going to be a nice happy ending where he did his job and he goes home.
Yeah, that's always a struggle I have, is because I've been watching for decades the Premier League and football in general, and so seeing, you know, some of the licenses that they take, and look, all credit to, of course, the creators and the writers, and you know, who kind of look at this and understand it's a TV show, so we got to make the drama work within the TV show. If we started to be authentic about this it would be something, a different kind of show, and that's not what the show's about. The show is not about teaching about the Premier League. The show is that can happen, but the show is more about seeing how this guy, who really has these homespun ways of coaching, homespun ways of existing, how that can still work in a much more cynical society. And Nate kind of represents that, you know, Nate with the scrolling of the social media, and we'll get to Nate in a second, but his obsession with that social media stuff and how it affects his mood up or down. And clearly there's a lot of unresolved issues that Nate needs to confront, but we see that in this in how he conducts himself. Whereas Ted's not scrolling social media. Ted's not, looking on Twitter and seeing what the new dance is. That's not his thing, or TikTok or whatever. That's not his thing. But he loves his players. And so although he's having a crisis of confidence, like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Have I overstayed my welcome? And has me being here hurt my marriage more than helped my marriage, affected my kid more than it helped my kid? It was fun 3 seasons ago. Now I've seen the ramifications. And though I've helped Jamie Tart and I've helped Roy Kent, and to a degree, I imagine by the end of the season, he'll have helped Nate and Coach Beard, of course, and Rebecca. What have I done for me? And so I think that's where we're going to see Ted have to kind of confront self-love and what he's going to need to do for himself. And I like the way that kind of laid itself out in this first episode. Yeah, the sewer trip was funny, and that's standard Ted Lasso stuff to do that. And you'd think the players by now would have created some kind of, a benefit of the doubt situation with Ted, but they're still kind of cynical with all the tactics that he chooses. But it works, right? It gets them to think about, okay, we need to come together. Jamie Tart, of all people, getting them all to kind of chill out when they're getting upset about the meme. So his stuff has really worked and helped everybody. Has Ted helped Ted, though? And I think that's where we're going to see. There's a famous song from the 1970s. I can't remember what it's the title. It's like, I've been to everywhere, but I've never been to me. So we're going to see if this is what's going to go on with Ted Lasso. But I like that we're seeing the little friction with Rebecca. It was resolved by the end, possibly, but like Rebecca coming out and really being obsessed with trying to destroy Rupert. If that's resolved now, great. But if not, it could lead to some real how can I say that? Real tension and friskiness between them that we haven't seen since season 1. So that could be a new kind of conflict to throw in here that we haven't seen in a different way, because as I said, the pressures of the Premier League are real tough there once you get elevated. All right, let's move on to Nate, man. Let's deal with Nate, and we'll swing back to Roy and Keeley after this. But let's deal with Nate here before we take a quick break in between these conversations. So we see Nate coming in. He's driving that little small car. He kind of like, gets himself out of the car. But we see him coming in, and they're playing, Eric B. and Rakim? He's coming in, and he's ignoring people when they try to talk to him. When they come into his office, he's telling them to get out. He's looking, but he's checking his social media. Is he the Wonder Kid? Is he all of this? Goes out onto the pitch to train the players at West Ham and treats them like dog shit. You see him like the dummy line or whatever he creates.
The dum-dum line.
The dum-dum line, that's it. Yeah, and then when he gets called into Mannion's office, he is like a puppy dog all over again, seeking favor, right? And we see this. This is a pattern of his, from Ted, from his dad, from Mannion here, from Rupert. And we see that Rupert like tows his car, and he has to admit that it's his car. And then later we see him go to the press conference, and Rupert is putting all this pressure on him in the office, right? You're going to be great. You're this wonder kid. You're going to be fantastic for us. You're going to really take us places. And Nate's not even sure about that within, even though he trusts his tactics. He's not sure within. And we see that come out in the press conference. He's initially hesitant. He doesn't know how to respond. And then he goes down underneath and just he triggers himself by remembering these moments of trauma, spits, which is a carryover from the last season, then gets back on the chair and just eviscerates everybody, including Ted, in that meme about them going into the sewer. And then by the end is super frustrated seeing how it hasn't rattled Ted at all, and then gets into that car that Rupert buys for him and drives off. But like, again, it's this idea of he's got all the potential, but there is this real angry streak because he hasn't dealt with his issues about how he was treated by his dad and his mom.
Well, I mean, he's a bully. And when he's in a position to bully someone, he will bully them. Like, West Ham's version of Higgins when he comes in. Oh, there's the Wonder Kid. Get out.
Yeah.
Just boom. Right. Doesn't even give the guy a second. Like, get out. Like the moment that he is in sort of the dominant position, he lords it over people. But the moment he's in the beta position, and you can tell he does not know how to address Rupert's assistant. Yeah. Because he's like, well, you're an assistant, but also you have this thing that I don't.
Right.
You have got this chilly confidence that does not seem to be affected by Rupert whatsoever. Like
Or
this,
even by Nate, because Nate
oh
tries to
well,
dismiss her when she comes down onto the pitch to call him into Rupert's, and she's like just looking at him, you know.
yeah, just stands there like, let's go. Yeah, I mean, Nick Mohammed's doing a really, really good job. I mean, again, you're thinking about the car, like he's a little guy, and so you see him trying to squeeze into this. This has to be like a Matchbox car, essentially. But you can see how intelligent he is, and just how damaged he is.
Yeah.
At the same time, I mean, that moment where he goes after that one reporter who, to the reporter, like, play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yeah, true.
It's like maybe don't address the coach like this. But he eviscerates the reporter, goes on to use the recycled joke that he used already about Richmond finishing in 20th because there's no 21st, and then the really the jagged point at Ted when he says they practice in a sewer because their coach is so shitty, and you can see Rupert is just like yes, because it's not just that Rupert wants to win, it's the fact that this is directed at Richmond vis-a-vis his ex-wife.
Yeah.
So. But that moment, and again, the whole Wonder Kid, Wonder King thing is, it's a joke that it never gets old for me. And it's one of those things that it's Nate's, even though I feel like Wonder King is a very common phrase, the fact that nobody gets it, it's just really, really funny. But then you see, as Nate is scrolling through, and how Ted has, in a moment has won the hearts of the press again. Like they were reveling in Nate's kind of put downs, but the moment that Ted goes high, everyone's just like, oh, there you go. And you see one of the memes is actually directed at Nate, saying, who's the wanker now? And so again, like I don't think I mean I think Nate stays with West Ham. I think West Ham maybe wins. But maybe it's going to be the personal journey that Nate goes on. I mean, I sure hope we give him some sort of redemption arc, that he's able to kind of suss out what he needs to go forward to live like a happy, healthy life. But Rupert's a piece of shit. Like he's always going to be a piece of shit. But Nate has not gone full Palpatine yet. There's still a little glimmer of hope.
I want to bring this up real quick when you mentioned Nate, because this is what Nick Mohammed tweeted. He said, I distinctly remember receiving the first episode of season 3, desperate to know if the writers were going to lay the foundation for Nate's possible redemption. Then I got to the scene and thought, oh, heck, episode 1 out now. Melting smiley face. So I love that as an emoji for him to use that. So shout out to Nick Mohammed, who understands that whole situation with Nate.
That's really funny.
You want a redemption for Nate because you can tell that he's a lost soul. And certainly there's been a lot of damage from his parents. He's a sensitive kid. He has not gone to therapy, probably because of what his parents would think if he went to therapy. And so confronting these problems, we're going to see a Matt Damon, Robin Williams moment. There's no way we're not getting, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And Nate and Nick Mohammed, possibly, if the episode is written perfectly and Nick Mohammed nails the performance, we're looking at a possible Emmy for Nick Mohammed, I think, down the road. If the redemption, come to Jesus moment is this emotional catharsis of years and years of pain being unleashed from him. He did it with Jamie. He's done it with Roy. He did it with Rebecca and even Keeley a little bit. There's no way he's not going to be able to do this with Nate, because this whole thing is coming from the fact that Nate I always wanted Ted's favor. And so this is going to be very interesting, because Ted himself having a crisis of confidence. And it's really funny because you've got the two owners who are trying to bring out the worst in each other's managers. And that's not the way this should be going down. And Ted, even on the phone with his son, when Henry said, like, why is Nate on the sideline? Nate needs to be, because you guys are still going to be friends, right? So, you're going to see Ted find his way back to this situation. Nate's going to do all he can do. And eventually he's going to be able to, he's going to realize that how corrupt Rupert is. And we'll see what that leads to down the road between him. And remember, he got that text from his mom and his dad, his mom saying, your father saw you on the telly and he was excited because he thought it was going to make his dad proud. And he said he was mad because you cussed too much, but he'll get over it. So still the lift up and the smackdown going on there for Nate. So a lot to navigate for him for sure. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll jump into Keeley and Roy and Rebecca right after this.
Do 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 do. I didn't know if that was a Geek Buddies thing. I'm so programmed. The moment I see a still image to start humming.
I think what I'm going to do is clip out pieces from the episode to play in those 6 seconds, and boom, we come back, so we don't get strike, but we get a little reference to Ted. But let's move on to this. Okay, so we've got Roy and Keeley here. Roy, has got a little bit of concern about taking over for Nate. Tactics, former players becoming part of coaching staffs or becoming the managers themselves is not unheard of in the Premier League. So this is an actual storyline here. So what are his tactics going? Is he going to be able to live up to what Nate was able to do? We see him having the back and forth with Coach Beard and Coach Lasso there about the 4-4-2. They make a joke about how the Russians came up with it and all of that. But this idea of how he wants to play the 4-4-2 is the standard formation in football, always, because you know where you can go. It's like the box step in dancing. It's so standard, and it's the foundational piece. So will they just stay in the 4-4-2 is going to be really, really interesting. But Roy's point is everybody knows where they're supposed to be at all times every second. So that's Roy's mentality, because Roy is so rigid, because Roy is probably a player who got the most out of his talent that he could. He was never a Ronaldo type player, but he was focused and disciplined. And so this is the way the team needs to be. So we're going to see how much they're going to want to flare a little bit to counter a little bit of Roy Keane's rigid approach in terms of tactics. But we also see that Keeley is dealing with running this PR firm that she has and the emotions that come with it. Her and Rebecca have a good cry and a nice lunch talking about things and where they're at. And then we see them have the conversation, Roy and Keeley, with Roy's niece and explaining to her that they're breaking up, which I saw a lot of people on social media get upset about, even though I feel like the end of season 2 telegraphed that. They speak about, but they're not even sure. So even they have a crisis of confidence about whether they should be breaking up or not, Shannon. So what do you think about how this all went down with Keeley and Roy, and then also Keeley and Rebecca?
Well, with Roy, the pitch is where he's home.
Yes.
So the whole idea of this idea, the whole idea of this is the formation we need to play. This is what they grew up doing. They know how to do this.
Yeah.
This is the approach we need. But then you see in matters of the heart, he's maybe not as comfortable there. So when you get into the situation where a relationship does hit kind of rough waters, and it's not the 4-4-2, it's just like, I don't know how to operate in this. You imagine somebody like Roy Kent in the past, when a relationship has gotten rocky, he's sort of cut bait and run.
Yeah.
And because Keeley is also in a place she's never been, being the head of her own operation, she tells Rebecca, I'm so busy, I have to schedule time to cry.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So you see, it's maybe this season is just all about communication and how they, when Roy talks about, he tells his niece that they're both busy. That's why Keeley says they're going on a break. He says they're breaking up. Right. Or rather, they broke up.
Right.
I mean, by the end of season 2, I don't know about you, but when Keeley sent him on that trip by himself, it's like, that's a breakup.
Yeah, that's a breakup. Yeah.
I mean, it's a soft pedal to a breakup, but it's a breakup. So the whole idea that even there, when Keeley tries to console him and say, look, I know you're nervous about this, but then they realize they're in mixed company. Like, okay, maybe now is not the time to have this conversation. Yeah. And because they're both so busy, that's the thing, is they never had time to actually really have this conversation. Them as a couple, they're really, really funny because they both have zero filter. One expresses themselves vastly different than the other. But them as a couple, they just seem to work, but they've hit these unfamiliar grounds. And my guess with them is by the end, they are gonna be together. That would be my guess. I know in season 2, it looked like is there going to be sort of a Keeley Jamie reunion, which
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to I think Keeley now is probably too busy to even entertain those notions.
Right.
But my guess is that they do end up together. And we still haven't talked about Rebecca yet, right?
Yeah, no, but feel free.
All right.
Chime in, man.
Well, no, I mean the whole thing with Rebecca is, the way she phrased it is how I've gone past wanting to destroy Rupert's life.
Yeah.
I just want to beat him. And because now she has this singular minded goal, you can see sort of the darker aspects of her personality coming out. Like she recognized in the past what Ted brought to the table, his lack of knowledge of the game. Notwithstanding, he does have a quality that the players responded to that ultimately did result in a success, in a promotion. But now it's like it's one of those things like you're never quite satisfied. Like whenever you achieve a goal, the first thing you want to do is set another goal. It seems like we're kind of getting Rebecca from season 1.
Yes,
who is all about like, hey, so now I'm in new territory. What do I fall back on? Him. I don't like him. That's what I'm falling back on.
Right.
And again, I don't want to see it happen, but I do think there's a chance that Rebecca fires Ted.
Yeah, maybe. What coach puts Roy Kent in charge or Coach Beard in charge? Who knows, man? Yeah, but I like that we're getting this aspect of Rebecca, right? I mean, Hannah Waddingham is such a damn good actress, and certainly a lot of people are loving her and been nominating her for awards or whatever. So having a little more of this kind of darker side of herself, because unfortunately, that's what can be triggered by people who've hurt you or who've dismissed you or pushed you away, and so we saw her navigate that at her father's funeral, rather. And now we're seeing this element of her that's becoming more and more ferocious. And I think this is going to be an interesting thing she's going to walk, because that's going to be her path. How much of Rupert's, because I think even Keeley brought that up in their lunch. Like, why are you focusing? Why is he still in your head? Why is he still messing with you? Girl to girl, what's this all about? And so when she sends that text, like, good job to let Ted be Ted, she was essentially sensed where Rebecca was going because she knows her by now. And so she was very happy to see that Ted was able to just not fall into the trap that Rebecca may have wanted him to. And also this idea that how much of this is going to cause her to wreck the team. Remember, in the first season, she wanted to wreck the team as a FU to Rupert. That's why she hired Ted. But now she wants the team to succeed, but Ted is still the coach. So now she's like, is Ted the right coach to help me succeed in the Premier League and beat Rupert? And that could cause problems for her and Ted, but also financial problems for the team. As oh god, I forget his name when he comes in with Leslie. When Leslie comes in with the list of the players, the transfer, it could mess with the finances of a club to bring the wrong player in. Also, the chemistry in the club. Ted doesn't want to bring anybody in, but Rebecca may try to bring a couple of new players in that could mess with the chemistry of the team, mess with who's winning, and if they underperform, that she's spending a lot of money for a player that's riding the pine or not doing well in games and matches, and that could be an issue as well. So is this going to be something that's going to wreck her by the end of the season or somewhere in the middle of the season where she's going to have to kind of figure out that she's got to let it go? So that's going to be her journey as well. How much of Ted can she put in herself to counter what Rupert is trying to do through Nate? So that's going to be interesting as well. With the Keeley stuff, Juno Temple is so damn good in this role, man. I love to see her in this role. And her and Brett Goldstein's chemistry is so good. And seeing her and the pressures. And I thought this was really cool because it was written by Leanne Bowen, a female writer here this episode. And so the idea of these two women crying and talking about crying, not as a weakness, but as an orgasm for the soul, I thought was really cool because it had been for a while. They're like, oh, why do they always show women crying? And now we're seeing two women cry, and that it's seen as a moment of strength, as a moment of release, as a moment of emotional catharsis. And certainly human beings, regardless of gender or how they identify, have those moments where you just got to let it out. And so seeing her cry, and I love that Leslie showed his shirt later on in the episode, which I thought was great, moment of care. So, there's just it's such a beautiful character because she's trying to, fight to achieve something. and from where she's come from. And she knows she's not the smartest person. Like the CFO thing was really funny. She knows she's not the smartest person, but she's driven and she gets it done. And so there's an element of that. So there's a lot of people in this episode that I think we're dealing with imposter syndrome, right? This idea that I shouldn't be in this position. Someone's going to find this out. And so Keeley's dealing with that. Rebecca's dealing with that. Nate's dealing with that. Ted's dealing with that. And Roy's dealing with that. This idea of imposter syndrome. Can I do what they think I can do in the position that I'm in? Will I succeed? And so I think that's going to be interesting to see throughout the entire season, how that all comes about. All right. Any final words or anything we missed that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, it's just nice to be back. It's nice to be back in the world of Ted Lasso. The show, again, it's just a shot of positivity to the arm. And the fact that it and Shrinking are on in the same week. With Shrinking, I don't know if any of you all are watching it, but I'm really enjoying it. And granted, I have a gigantic soft spot for Harrison Ford. But having these two overwhelmingly positive shows on right now, it's something. I think it's a nice escape from what we're dealing with day to day.
Oh, you're so right. She was my wife. Yeah, exactly. Harrison Ford, a great man for sure. I love that clip. I agree with you, Shannon. Season 2 wasn't 100% there for me. I love season 1, but season 3 is already starting out with a lot of vibes of season 1, which is getting me excited. I come out of this episode very excited to see what we're going to get for the rest of the season with Ted Lasso. And I hope it ends on a big high, so that we can, if it is the end, we can say goodbye to a pretty damn good and unique series that has no business working in such a cynical, skeptical world that we're living in. But that speaks volumes that it's become such a hit, because at the base foundation of so many people, we want to believe in the possibility of hope and love and success, no matter where we come from, and doing the right thing. And so I think that speaks volumes about the show, and capturing that essence is great without hiding the fact that, you got Ted talking about his panic attacks, that great moment in the press conference when he's just making fun of himself with how dumb are you? All of that, to own that. That's something I've still got to learn. How do you own people's criticism and turn it around instead of diving down into the depths and going back at them in snarky ways? So I love that there's still lessons being taught even amongst these scenes. So, all right, well, there you go. That's our spoiler review for episode 1 of Ted Lasso season 3. Thank you all so much for joining us or listening to us. Remember, you can always listen to stuff that we have here on the Outlaw Nation podcast network. Shannon, another fun show, brother. Tell them where they can find you and what we got going on.
Yeah, you can follow me on social media, on Twitter at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy. You can see me once or twice or sometimes 3 times a week with Mr. Rocha and Mr. Vogel over on the Geek Buddies with our main shows and our review shows. Yeah. You can see some of my current work on Netflix right now with Strawberry Shortcake, Barry in the Big City, seasons 1 and 2. And if you are a Party Down fan, you're probably tired of hearing this, but I was on the season premiere. It's on the stars right now. 6-episode season. Very, very funny thus far. You can see me pop up in season 1.
There you go. As for me, you can follow me at The Rocha Says. Was it?
Episode 1, not season 1.
1.
Season 3, episode 1.
Just like this one, season 3, episode 1. As for me, you can see down there, follow me there. More than anything else, please subscribe to the channel down below. I've got this crazy idea to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Help me do that by coming aboard the Outlaw Nation train. You see all the great content, the Hot Mic, the Geek Buddy stuff, the Jedi Way, my solo stuff. It's all here on the Outlaw Nation channel. So give it some love and subscribe and hit that bell button so you see we're dropping all this content. And Shannon and I will be reviewing Ted Lasso through the whole season 3 here. So look for us doing that going forward starting today. So thank you all so much for joining us. Y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. And we'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review episode from the Outlaw Nation for Ted Lasso here. Peace. Take care.